Welcome back to News Talk. I'm Bruce DuPuyt. Maryland will soon have a new United States Senator, Barbara Mikulski, retiring after 30 years in that post. Joining us now, Kathy Szeliga. She's the Republican running against Democratic Congressman from Montgomery County, Chris Van Hollen. Good to have you back. Thanks very much for coming in.
I'm so glad to be here.
How are you enjoying? I mean, you've been in politics. You've been successful. You serve Baltimore County in the Maryland House of Delegates, so you're on the campaign trail every 4 years. But to travel Maryland as you're doing now, I guess I'm curious, what's it like, because you're dealing with a really broad and diverse electorate, and I'm curious what issues, I know what issues people like me ask about, but what do people say to you when they're kind of talking about priorities in their lives at the moment?
Well, I just got elected in 2010, so I've only been in the House 5 years, took office in 11, and so I've run just twice in 2010 and then again in 14 when we brought in Governor Hogan, which of course was very exciting. So yes, running in a delegate district is much different than running statewide, and I'll tell you, it has been wonderful. As I've traveled across our state from Western Maryland, I was in Southern Maryland last night on the shore, and I represent Baltimore and Harford counties. It doesn't matter where I go, it's the same frustrations that Washington's broken. And they're tired of career politicians that just make promises and don't deliver any results. So it doesn't really matter, Democrat, Independent, Republican. The same message rings pretty true that, Kathy, we need you in Washington. We need you to get down there, roll your sleeves up, and fix some things.
And probably, too, in this time where we're not seeing job creation, although I shouldn't say that. We've had, I think, record job creation. I think it's
in Maryland.
70. We've seen, is it 70 months? Is that possible?
Well,
I think that's been
Maryland,
report, but we're certainly seeing wages flat, and that's that's making the squeeze on the middle class particularly intense. But there is an economic anxiety that's out there too.
Absolutely, and it's interesting. It's a tale of two cities with Annapolis and Washington, D.C. So in Annapolis, we have Larry Hogan, who's been there a year and a half, just a year and a half. And in that amount of time, he's really started to turn things around. And Maryland has gone from 47th to 11th in job creation. And I think in April, they were #1 in the nation. Maryland, was #1 in the nation for job creation. So we know what's working is that when you let taxpayers keep more of their money and you cut regulations on businesses, unnecessary regulations, businesses feel more optimistic about the future and they're willing to take a risk and hire more people. But we're not seeing that coming out of Washington, D.C. It's the same frustrations that I see with all jobs creators, and that the punitive regulatory environment is making it too hard for them.
What regulations should be repealed?
Well, I think some of them, we don't even know what regulations are out there. I'm a small business owner, my husband and I, in construction for 30 years.
Although in fairness, you just talked about the great burden that regulations are placing on the economy, and then you say you don't know what regulations are out there?
No,
How do you square that?
Well, yeah, sorry, I didn't finish the sentence, my brain got ahead of my mouth. For the last 7 years, there have been about 9 feet of regulations, if you stack paper upon paper, 26,000 regulations that have been promulgated. And I think a lot of business owners don't even know what they are or are not obeying. But I will tell you, in the regards to payroll, more and more reporting requirements. And in Maryland, they passed a law that allows Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation to come in your office and audit your payroll records at any moment. And, you know, a lot of small businesses have their business office in their home like we do. And, you know, you're just always thinking, gosh, someone could come any day, knock on my door and say, open up your house, open up your files to us. So that's just a small measure of the angst that I think especially small business feels.
Particularly, I guess, if you're the main person, if it's a really small company and it's the boss and a couple employees, you're the everything officer, right? You're the chief everything
Sure.
officer.
Yes, and that's, again, my husband and I, small business, pretty typical of a lot of our friends that have small businesses. I was HR, IT. You know, I could fix the computer and hire people and, you know, go clean the job site up when the labor didn't show up. So you see a lot of that, and those are the kind of businesses that are that employ most people, are these small businesses that
Sure.
you know, you just love and value your employees.
So many issues to talk about. I know you have a couple things you're eager to discuss. This week, Donald Trump is promising a major speech on immigration. And right now, there's a sense that he may be evolving, and he's used the word softening, on an issue where it was pretty clear to a lot of people, including many of his core supporters, where he stood and what he would attempt to do if elected President of the United States. And now there's this general sense of uncertainty, and even some of his own campaign people, when asked questions on
the Sunday shows.
On the Sunday
Sure.
shows, they're saying to be determined.
Yeah.
So let's cut through all that. What would you like to hear Donald Trump say when he goes to Arizona in terms of what, not trying to fixate on Trump, but on where the challenges immigration system now?
I think all of us feel, everybody, again, regardless of party affiliation, know that Washington has kicked the can down the road for 25 years. And the immigration problem that all of us know exists hasn't been addressed by either side. And, you know, just like career Washington insiders and career Washington politicians, they just make a lot of noise but don't do anything. And so I think that might be part of why you saw a Trump popularity, because he said, let's do something. Let's secure our borders. And instead, you get a lot of double talk from people in Washington that won't really tell you what they want to do to fix the problem. And so I think the public is waiting and anxious to hear some good solutions for our immigration problem.
What would you like to hear him say in his speech, or what would you like a President Trump to suggest be a path that the nation could follow and pursue to end 25 years of gridlock on this issue?
Yes, well, I think the first thing we need to do is have people commit to securing our borders. And I'm not talking about building a great wall, or, you know, there are plenty of ways to secure our border that include new technologies, because, you know, a wall isn't going to address tunneling underneath of it or other methodologies that people would come into our country illegally. I'll tell you, I talk to moms and people across our state that are concerned about drug addiction and the drugs pouring into our country. So securing the borders about national security, making sure we know that terrorists are not coming across our borders, and we're securing it for the drug trafficking, and we're securing it for immigration policies and purposes. So that's what I'd like to see, a plan, an agreement that lets secure our borders so Americans know who is in our country.
He talked long about a deportation force, and now apparently there seems to be some pullback on that, but again, folks aren't 100% sure, even though he's been on the campaign trail for a year now, and it's only 70-odd days till the election, 30-odd days till or some early voting states start to allow people to cast ballots. What should the next Congress do about the estimated 11 million undocumented persons?
Yeah, I mean, it's more than double the size of the number of people who live in Maryland. So 5.9 million people live in Maryland. And I think he realized that, you know, his original statements probably just were not doable. But what we have, again, I'd like to hear my opponent, Chris Van Hollen, talk about what he'd like to do. Will he commit to securing the border? Does he think that's important? Not just Chris Van Hollen, but other career politicians in Washington that just want to throw eggs at people and yet won't come up with their own solutions.
As the United States Senate, you would have such a powerful role in confirmation of Supreme Court justices. You would be one of 100 deciding whether a president's nominee moves forward, or in the case of Judge Merrick Garland, has the nomination stuffed in a drawer. Occasionally we see nominees rejected, though it's very, very rare, certainly in the modern era. Donald Trump has said he would nominate people in the role of an Antonin Scalia, Would you welcome that?
Yes, and I have said clearly what a loss to America when Judge Scalia passed away, and just great standard bearer for what I personally look for in a Supreme Court judge. So yes, that would be who I'm looking for, and I think we'd love to see what Hillary Clinton has in mind for Supreme Court judges. I know that Donald Trump has put some out there, and so let Americans choose.
Should the Senate have voted on the Merrick Garland nomination, given that there was ample time to do so?
Well, I think all we have to do is look back at political posturing from career politicians. When Barack Obama was in the Senate, he said, oh, we shouldn't be politicizing such an important duty of the Senate in the midst of an election. And Harry Reid, other leaders on the Democrat side had opposed that until the shoe was on the other foot. So
is a year enough time? I mean, if we're in, I can't do the math, if we're in 17, 18, 19, 20, if we're in early 2020, January 2020, and a president in his or her fourth year, but right at the beginning of the year, has a vacancy, should the Senate move on that?
Well, I think the Senate, as a senator, I would certainly want to meet with that person.
No, but on the vote, beyond the niceties of the meeting.
The vote should be...
if you have 12 months.
12 months certainly seems like plenty of time. Yes, that seems... the American citizens would say January certainly far enough away from November that it wouldn't be politicized, but as it grows closer, and obviously that vote doesn't happen overnight.
And of course it's longer than November because the president serves till January, so you're talking about 12 months, president gets in, nominates someone, it's a 13, 14 year.
But then there's that lame duck period that, you know, you have people voting who have no accountability if they're no longer elected.
It's interesting because the residents of your state voted at the ballot to approve same-sex marriage. Scalia was in the minority in the same-sex marriage case before the Supreme Court. How would you, as a member of the Senate, balance a sense of wanting to represent the people who elected you versus your admiration for Justice Scalia?
Well,
and that
this
political
is a great example. The people of Maryland voted. And so as a senator for a state where it's been on the ballot, I would have to stand by the voters of that state. And you know,
but you would vote to confirm someone who would be part of a 5-4 or 6-3 majority I mean, just because same-sex marriage is here doesn't mean it's ingrained in stone. It could be the next court, any future court could rule that the prior court was in error.
Sure, I'm not a senator that would have a litmus test. I just think that citizens expect you to be open-minded and listen to a person who's being nominated on their merits and not pick any issue that you like or don't like. But your job is to listen, to judge, to hear his or her views on a lot of things, but I will not be someone that will have one specific litmus test. Delegate
Szeliga, stand by for just a moment if you would, please. We'll pause here, a break. When we come back, much more of our conversation with Maryland Senate hopeful Kathy Szeliga. Our conversation here on News Talk with Maryland State Delegate Kathy Szeliga. She's a candidate for the United States Senate, the seat being vacated by long-serving Democrat Barbara Mikulski. It's Szeliga versus Van Hollen on your fall ballot. Did the U.S. pay ransom to Iran to get hostages freed?
It sure looks like it, doesn't it, Bruce? I think, what's the saying, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck? I mean, when you have a cargo plane with $400 million in cash that is waiting before we release, Iran releases prisoners, it certainly is a hostage ransom situation. And I think the president's all but admitted it without using the ransom word. And I guess
what they've said is that there were funds frozen from the Iran
79
from the late 70s.
Yes. Right, but it's the timing. When you have a plane, a cargo plane full of cash waiting, you know, the timing of the two were interlinked. So that's ransom. And common sense. People are tired of career Washington politicians with their double talk. Let's just be plain. You know, that you asked me about people as I go across the state, and the same theme comes back over and over. We need people in Washington with common sense that will just speak the truth in simple, plain language that everyone understands and not double talk things. So yes, I think that certainly look like ransom, and all it does is make Americans more, make it more dangerous for Americans across the globe. And I'll tell you, my opponent, Chris Van Hollen, we've asked him to weigh in on this and tell the people of Maryland what he thinks about it. He hasn't weighed in. And in fact, he's voted to continue to solidify the agreement. As you know, the ink was barely dry on that agreement when Iran launched ballistic missiles towards Israel and wrote on them, Israel must be wiped off the face of the earth. This is a rogue country, and sending $1.7 billion to that country will certainly make the world a more dangerous place. I'm adamantly opposed to this Iran deal, and Chris Van Hollen continues to support it.
To what extent, if at all, did donors to the Clinton Foundation get special access, special treatment, favors?
Well, I think that's still unraveling. But, every day I saw, I think, another new email that was revealed or, I uncovered just potentially today. And it does look like the Crown Prince of Bahrain, that was last week's news, got an entry in a favorable position with the State Department. It looks like pay to play. And Americans don't like that. Washington should not be for sale.
How do you look at the EpiPen controversy, where a drug that I guess Mylan didn't develop it, but they bought it, but they had the foresight to buy a drug, a medication, and a delivery system that really works and that people now depend on. But the price has gone up in a rather eye-popping way. At the same time, the CEO's salary has had the sorts of gains that many of us would be jealous of. What, if anything, can Washington do about that?
Yes, well, I read that with great interest. My mom has a deathly peanut allergy, and she's had, my mom, I won't reveal her age, but she has been on Social Security for a while. And my mother's had this peanut allergy her entire life. So I've grown up in a family with a mom that has an anaphylactic allergy to peanuts. My mom's carried an EpiPen as long as they've been available, as my entire, 54 years I've been alive.
Smart of her to be
Yes,
prepared.
I don't know at what point she got that. I don't know when they developed that.
But these price hikes don't seem tied. I mean, it's not gold.
And so
They're
I know
not putting literal gold in these devices.
This is life-saving to my mom.
So is there a role beyond just people sort of expressing their view that this is unseemly?
It's very unseemly. And now all of a sudden I find it interesting that they just released, now we're going to have a generic. Well, it took this to put a generic on the market. That seems questionable. And where has Congressman Van Hollen been on this? Where's Congress been on this? It also, then when you complicate it with Senator Manchin's daughter being the CEO, that just looks not right. It doesn't look right.
It's certainly good work if you can get it.
Yeah, and we need to make sure our kids and citizens with these terrible allergies have this life-saving drug.
I have 30 seconds left, and I apologize. We'd love having you here. What's the likelihood of debates this fall?
We would love to have as many debates as possible, and we're again asking Congressman Van Hollen to engage across our state. Let the citizens of Maryland know who he is and who I am.
And let it happen on News Talk. That's my 2 cents.
Here. I say yes.
Kathy Szeliga, thanks for your time. Come back anytime.
Thank you.
We're back with a program note after this.